Andy here, coming to you in the middle of a pandemic, as you can see by my fancy new Hawks mask. Want to start recording some videos for AP Biology, so this is my first one here. Oh, who am I kidding? I can't record a video with the mask on. But I just want everyone to remember for posterity that we were making these during the middle of our COVID-19 pandemic. So the first video here, we're working on section 1.1 and 1.2 as we begin our journey through AP Biology. I hope that you'll find these videos helpful. Will save us time in class, and if we have to go remote, we'll have a way to kind of discuss and talk about topics. So again, this video, I want to talk about sections 1.1 and 1.2. This is out of Mader and Windelspecht's Biology, 13th edition. Kind of the outline of the chapter. Today, we are going to just do the first two here, 1.1, 1.2. In this video, Intro to AP Biology, a little bit about the course, and kind of start covering the big ideas that we find in AP Bio. And today we'll just discuss briefly evolution, and then you can see here the other big ideas and also the science practices, which we will cover in the future videos here. Okay, starting with section 1.1. Again, this is just kind of an intro to AP Bio. We've discussed this the last couple of years, especially Bio 1. We always start the year. When we don't know words, we look at the root, the prefixes, suffixes. Okay, remember bio means life. Okay, logos, okay, or ology refers to study of. Okay, so biology, the study of life. And that's what we're going to be looking at this year. How do living things function? How do they work? How do they interact? What things make up? We spend a lot of time kind of in cellular biology, biochemistry aspects of biology and life. That deals a lot with the chemical elements. And then kind of what laws do they follow? We get into some ecology, how do they interact, and that sort of thing. So, living things themselves and their interactions with each other and their interactions with the non-living environment, that's all kind of lumps under this category of AP Bio. When you look at life across the earth, how many different millions and millions of species we have, and this is what always sort of drew me into biology, was just I enjoy being outside, I enjoy nature, just the sheer diversity of life that we find just all on our planet. And there's a lot of different documentaries and stuff that have been created that I enjoy watching, just all the unique creatures, from an octopus to sunflower to these yummy morels, your extra credit in the spring, okay, to little things you can't see with your own eye, things that might be underneath the microscope that make us sick, that actually have they still have their functions and their jobs within the ecosystem. But despite all of this diversity, there are some characteristics, whether it's at the cellular level, the biochemical level, which they share. And we want to focus a lot of time on that. Like, what is the basic structure that sort of life builds upon, and that keeps it going? AP Bio, the way the College Board has sort of organized the curriculum, is into four big ideas. Big idea, evolution, and these are actually a lot of the sections of the chapter, of this first chapter, plus the science practices. Evolution, energy and molecular building blocks. What are we made up of? Information storage, transmission, and response. This would be your DNA, RNA, genetics. Interdependent relationships then gets into some of the ecology type things. This might be a little difficult to see because it's so small, but this is what the College Board puts out as their course at a glance type reference. And I have a big poster of this if you want to see it. But you can kind of see the different units that they expect us to cover and where we will spend our time this year. And it's kind of small, but you can kind of see the percentage of the exam from each one. So 8 to 11% comes from chemistry of life. 10 to 13% cell structure and function, cellular energetics, that'd be our photosynthesis, enzymes, cell respiration, fermentation, cell communication, cell cycle, heredity and genetics, gene expression, gene regulation, and then our evolution, natural selection, and then our ecology at the end. So you kind of get a glance. They also have kind of how many days should you spend on each one. And this is kind of what we work our way through pretty much in this order throughout our year here in AP Bio. The second section of chapter 1, they start to go through the big ideas. The first one being evolution. The theory of evolution explains the diversity and unity of life. Okay, we just talked about how I was kind of amazed by all the diversity of life that you find on the earth, but a lot of the underlying, we all do glycolysis. Okay, no matter what kind of creature you are, you do glycolysis as part of getting energy to sustain that life. So there is this underlying unity underneath all of this diversity. And one of the ways that is tied together is the theory of evolution. In the older version of this textbook, they actually said it was the guts of biology. Guts, we say it's kind of the main thing, the guts of it. It's also, they said it stands for great unifying theory. So this theory of evolution can kind of tie together how this unity of sort of how everything is tied together, how that ties back to this descent from a common ancestor, and then how has that been modified over time to get the diversity that we see today. Okay, the mechanism for which evolution happens it comes from Charles Darwin, and the mechanism he proposes natural selection. Okay, where the aspect of the environment selects which traits are more apt to be passed to the next generation. We talked about this in Biology 1. We call it survival of the fittest. What makes you the fittest is having favorable traits that allow you to survive better in a certain environment and reproduce. And if you're better able to survive and then reproduce, those favorable traits that you have are more likely to be passed on. And the raw material, or they say the raw material for natural selection is mutations. Because to get different traits, you have to have mutations in your DNA to cause those changes. And that causes variation, which causes maybe some of them to be more fit than others. And so we see this. The next slide, we'll see an example of this, where you have a deer eating leaves off of a tree. Well, let's say there's a mutation that some of the leaves have kind of fuzzy to it, kind of fuzzy leaf texture, or these little kind of hairs on the leaf. The deer prefer the smooth leaves. Those fuzzy hairs make them not very palatable. They don't really like to eat those. So what are the deer going to pick? More and more of the trees that have smooth leaves. And what happens over a long period of time, there's going to be less and less trees with smooth leaves because the young saplings and that are trying to grow, the deer are going to pick all the leaves off and eat those and destroy them. And generations later, you'll have more plants with the fuzzy leaves because they're being selected for. The smooth leaf trees are being selected against. Okay, so we see a change in the gene pool, okay, over time and through natural selection, and that's what we call evolution. When we map this out in Bio 1, we call this a cladogram, where we kind of map out how the different things are related. Okay, you'll see that kind of all the way to the left is some of the first cells, and then you have this evolutionary tree. Okay, so every time there's a branch here, we have what's called a derived character. Okay, so we have cells, bacteria, and archaebacteria, and then those are the prokaryotes. Well, then at the next derived character, the next node, we have a character with a cell with a nucleus and compartmentalization, okay, the eukaryotes. And then it shows them split into single cellular protists, ones with cell walls that can photosynthesize would be plants, and then the non-photosynthetic fungi and animalia. So again, time past to present, and you get different derived characters, and it kind of shows a tree of kind of as we trace life back and how it evolved. When we use ways to try to organize that diversity, if you go in the grocery store, not everything is just sort of scattered all about, or it would be impossible to find things. Okay, if I need a gallon of milk, I go to the grocery section, to the dairy aisle, or the dairy where all the dairy stuff is, and then I'll find all the different types of milk, and I'll find my 2% white milk, and I can grab it and go home fairly quickly. Taxonomy does that same thing with biology. It takes those millions and millions of species, and it tries to organize them, give them names according to certain rules, so scientists know what each other is talking about. Systemics takes that taxonomy and it tries to use the evolutionary relationships in order to categorize them. And what we've done, and we've talked about this before in biology in Bio 1, is we start with the domain. The domain is the largest category, includes the most things, and then good King Philip came over for good spaghetti. So it's kind of backwards here. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And as you go from right to left, okay, you narrow it down. You get more and more and more specific. So if we take a look at an example of this, of 4 living things: a human, turtle, a mosquito, and a tree, okay, these 3 are all in kingdom Animalia, or all animals, where that's a plant. So right away you can see very different. And then the turtle and the human are both chordates, chordata, phylum Chordata, which means backbones, where the mosquito is an insect or arthropoda, and so that veers off there. Then the turtle and the human will split because we are mammals. Turtles are reptiles, and it keeps working its way down. Remember, the last 2 genus and species are the binomial nomenclature. The scientific name would be Homo sapiens, and the turtle, again, would have its own name as well. If we look at some of the 3 main domains of living things, archaea, they are kind of archaic, sort of means the oldest. They live in very extreme environments. They are prokaryotic, which means no nucleus, not really any membrane-bound organelles. They absorb their food, or they are able to do chemosynthesis. Remember, instead of photosynthesis, using chemicals as their electron source to make food. And very unique chemical characteristics. This is sulfolobus, which is an archaean. Often live in like hot springs, sulfur springs. Some of the methanogens that live like in cow guts, ruminant animal guts that produce methane. They live kind of in these extreme environments, have some unique characteristics. Domain archaea is a little bit different than domain bacteria, mainly because of one of the ways we use to differentiate between the 2 is whether they have peptidoglycan, which is kind of this protein sugary stuff in their cell walls. Archaebacteria do not have peptidoglycan, whereas bacteria do. And we use that to kind of differentiate between the 2. Domain bacteria are the kind of the common, like here are the little hot dogs, E. coli, Escherichia coli, which we find everywhere. Domain bacteria on our skin, in our guts, in the soil, just in the air. They're all over the place. They're prokaryotic, various shapes. They're in almost all environments. They can absorb their food. Some photosynthesize, and some do chemosynthesis as well. and they're just found everywhere. Domain Eukarya are all the eukaryotes, and these would include four kingdoms. The protists, kind of these single-celled, mostly water-living type things, slime molds. The kingdom fungus, mushrooms, molds, yeast, and some like ringworm. Plantae, the plants, and kingdom Animalia. Okay, so these four kingdoms are all found under domain Eukarya. They're still working on where some of those kingdoms are located. So archaea and bacteria, they're still working on kingdoms. There are kingdoms designated for those, but they're still working on those. Eukarya are the four kingdoms I just listed, although they are working for supergroups that are being put in with those as well. And the kingdoms that listed down here below. Again, protists, fungi, plantae, and animalia. And finally, a quick backtrack here to scientific names. Remember binomial nomenclature? We use them universal, and they're Latin-based. So, Latin is not a spoken language anymore, but scientists use it because it's universal. Scientists can figure out what other scientists are talking about. It's a two-part name, so like Homo sapiens. Homo is the genus. It's always capitalized. On the second is the species, sapiens, and it's written in lowercase. And again, you remember this from Bio 2 from doing your bug projects. You need to italicize both of them with genus capitalized, species lowercase. Okay. And sometimes you may have a subspecies, like Homo sapiens sapiens, where you'd have both of those species and subspecies would be in italics and lowercase. Okay, so that wraps up sections 1.1 and 1.2. And feel free to review this video or write down any questions that you may need to ask me in class.